So tonight's topic, everyone, as you know, is under the category of raising wise leaders. And we're going to examine, how we create wisdom in young people. And also how we manage to look after, inspire youth to make a difference in their lives and in other lives. So Roy, maybe you can show the next slide. Okay, so this definition of wisdom is by the wise is meant men whose knowledge is not confined to mere words and whose lives have been fruitful and have produced enduring results. So maybe we can go back, Roya, to just sharing, not sharing the screen at this moment. When we're talking about this definition of wisdom, we have to think about what has happened in the field of education and in how we parent. What is it that if we want to sit and think about what are we trying to have our youth become? And if we want to think about that question, we really have to be clear in our purpose. And at the foundation or the beginning of Nancy Campbell, we started talking about how do we create wisdom in our students. So, in a day where it seems like technologically and in other ways, everything is possible, just because you can do everything, it doesn't mean you should. And so the art of judgment becomes one of the most critical things in a person's life, both for their own transformation and well-being, as well as the transformation and well-being of the community around them. The biggest issue that I think has become problematic, and I alluded to this in the last seminar, which is the disconnection of learning from knowledge. Maybe we need to mute some people that are not muted. Okay, good. So the disconnection of doing from learning about it. So as we ourselves step forward to achieve something, a whole lot of skills and understanding has to be developed in order to do that. And one has to be able to discriminate between all the possibilities of what we could be involved in and what is most important to do. And so it becomes more and more critical that a person doesn't just do whatever they want to do or whatever comes to their mind, but they're able to weigh what is the most pressing next need. So when we're trying to impart to young people, as well as ourselves, how we're going to be able to make a significant contribution, we have to always talk in a manner that connects our purpose and meaning to what it is we're trying to learn. And that may seem obvious, but when students disconnect their learning, or when youth disconnect what they're doing from what they're trying to learn, then motivation suffers terribly. So our capacity to talk about the type of learning that we're going to engage in and connect it to our purpose is really vital. So Roy, do you want to share the next slide then? There are many times when parents may or may not be able to think about what it is they're trying to achieve. The Nancy Campbell vision, Nancy Campbell Academy vision of education is significantly different from a materialistic worldview and has substantially different goals and outcomes. And what would those differences be? When you start to focus on the development of wisdom, you're no longer talking about things, you're talking about becoming capable at going through processes and understanding deeper meanings of things. And when you're not having a materialistic worldview makes a person feel entitled, makes a person feel that they're entitled to things, makes them self-centered. When you have a more profoundly, what I would call spiritual or meaningful worldview, then you think about gratitude, you think about what you're grateful for, and you think about how you can make deeper contributions, how you can utilize your talents and your capacities and your energies to make a difference in your life and in the others' lives around you. And that you're not conducting yourself in a wise way if you are thinking about just your own self-centeredness. But as you think of something greater, you're able to accomplish what you need as well as what others need. And we would call this the twofold moral purpose. The twofold moral purpose is to develop your own capacity and talents and then make a wider contribution to the development and transformation of your community and the world around you. So this would be the goal that needs to be inspiring. To be honest with youth and our youth is really important. So we should no longer be presenting the world as, or the world as it is, as something that, you know, we're proud of or we're happy of. There's lots of things to be proud of in the world, but the fact is there are many very, very significant problems. And those problems are the result of faulty or inadequate thinking that has led to these difficulties and our own inability to solve those problems. So in many ways, I like to say to youth, you can't give them the idea that the world is now complete and that they're just a participant in it. In actual fact, the world needs tremendous amount of change and development to move from its present state to a better state. And that's an inspiring thing to say to them, that they have a role in moving the world from one condition to another. And in order to do that, each of us will have to do our parts. We'll have to step up to make that difference. And by doing this, we kind of present a vision for them to be able to think about things in a much bigger way that everyone must contribute to. People don't get inspired to become involved in things if they don't think that they're needed. So, you know, at this time, people are questioning authorities and what it is that they think is valuable. Nothing would go unquestioned. And if we're teaching youth in the right way, whether they're our own youth or the youth that are attending school, we're always teaching them to be critically thinking. Now, critically thinking does not mean to be critical. The whole world has developed their capacity to be critical. They haven't really developed their capacity to solve problems. But in order to solve problems, you have to be able to look at something, unpack the assumptions of what has happened, that we got here, and then look at how these things can be addressed so things could change. Do you want to go to the next slide, Roya? I'll just say next. Dr. William Hatcher, a renowned expert in philosophy and mathematics, stated that the knowledge of the inherent nobility of the human being, if that were taught to humanity, it would radically change everything. So one time when I was having a conversation with Dr. William Hatcher, who has since passed away, he made this statement. And I thought to myself, you know, is this true? And what does nobility mean? Right now, a lot of things are happening throughout the world because we don't understand this principle or this concept. The nobility of human being means each of us has the capacity to reflect virtues and qualities, and that would be part of our higher self. But each of us can be essentially reflecting really dark qualities, things that are not helpful to the development of humanity. And when I say humanity, it can be to the development of our own relationships, our own family, our own community. So when we understand that each human being is noble, meaning it has this tremendous capacity to reflect good qualities or turn to negative qualities, and it's all about choices, then we approach our adolescence with this idea that every day and every moment, really, we're making choices. Am I going to do the noble thing or am I going to do the ignoble thing? In other words, the thing that leads to destructive processes, or am I going to go to constructive processes? It's a very important choice that we're making almost all the time. So when I decide that I want to get an education, I'm working towards a constructive process, building capacity to be able to contribute. when I decide that I don't care about things that are important or valuable to other human beings, then I'm engaging in a destructive process. So teaching this concept that each one of us as a noble being has this capacity to choose at all times. And that right to choose, or that free will to choose, is one that we have to exercise with wisdom. That's a capacity that young people have to understand. And when they start to understand the concept of choices, and that should start really before adolescence, when they're children, that starts to happen, but it has to be strengthened more and more. And as they become 15 years old and older, by then they should clearly be able to understand the effect of their choices. Do you want to read a sentence change, Mariah? Next. So right now, the world is a bit confused about what it is that they're often trying to do or how to do it. When I was a child and youth worker, I remember that this father came in to bring his son for treatment. His son was out of control. He wouldn't go to school. He was only about 10 years old. And I remember that as there were 3 child and youth workers when this father brought his son, and the father just kept putting his hands in the air and saying, "This child is out of control. I don't know what to do." Meanwhile, the child was jumping all over, swinging from the doors, just totally out of control. And as a person there, I thought, you know, the father should stop him, but he never did. He had no limits, he had no expectations, and he had no goals for this kid. In fact, he himself was out of control. He had no idea what he should do. And so it was all we could do to kind of tolerate until we got him out the door. Because when he got out the door, then I took this child and I sat him down in a chair and I said, "You have to sit here for 10 minutes and calm down." And he looked at me and I knew that he had no intention of sitting there. And the reason, and then I said to him, "You know, you either sit here for 10 minutes or I will have to hold you here for 20 minutes. And he looked at me to assess me, which children do. And I said, "And I get paid by the hour. So if I hold you for 20 minutes, it doesn't really matter to me. But I think it'd be better if you choose to sit here for 10 minutes. And so he sat there. Now, what I'm going to talk about, the reason I'm using this example, it's a simple example, but it's trying to give clarity. What was I providing for him? I provided a very clear expectation of what I wanted from him. I made the limits very clear, and I made it so he knew he'd make the right choice of having to do that. By doing that, it reduced his anxiety. Because when a child or a youth has no limits and no expectations and no goals, it intensifies feelings of anxiety. And when a child feels anxious or a youth feels anxious, they either express it in one of 2 emotions, one of 2 actions, I should say, and that would be apathy or aggression. Girls tend to be, historically, girls will tend to be more apathetic about doing things and boys will tend to be more aggressive. But that can definitely be quite turned around. It just tends to be. Now, this boy was very aggressive to his environment, trying to destroy things, jumping around, and that was him acting out his anxiety. As soon as he had clear expectations and he saw somebody believed he could do them, he stopped his aggression, he stopped his action. The reason that was important for me to do then is I needed to find out, did he have the capacity to choose, or was something else bigger going on? But in actual fact, he could do it. So that meant that he did have the capacity to choose. And I simply provided a clear expectation that you're not going to destroy everything around here and that you're expected to behave in a certain manner. And so he did. So when parents don't have limits or expectations that are reasonable, now I like to think that the most important limits are really just 3. We don't hurt ourselves, we don't hurt others, and we don't break property. And the reason we don't do any of those 3, those are like the laws, the things we must make sure we follow, because that's for civilization. And the expectations are more than that. We treat each other with courtesy, we're kind to each other, we do important things to help each other or to build capacity. And when that starts to happen, a different cycle begins. So let's see the next slide. When there are clear limits, And the other part is permission to exceed expectations. Maybe I think my child could do this, but they want to do something more. We had one young lady at Nancy Campbell once that wanted to become a doctor. She had attention deficit and a few other issues that were interfering with her learning. But all of her teachers prior to her coming to the school in grade 9 had told her there's no way she could be a doctor. She just wasn't smart enough. And I told the teachers at Nancy Campbell, do not tell her anything, but you can achieve whatever you want to achieve. All you have to do is work at it. She proceeded with that kind of expectation. She exceeded expectations of others around her. She wanted to be something more than others thought she could be, and she had a direct commitment to that. She pursued that through her 4 years of high school. By the time she was applying to university, she applied for some medical schools, but then she learned about midwifery. And there were very few positions in this program for midwifery, but she decided that's what she really wanted to do. So she also applied to that. And she got into that program and she became a midwife and is now practicing, doing a great job doing it. So on the way to her goal, she decided to give that up because she wanted something else. But the other thing was equally important and something that she really desired and frankly was really well suited to. She could have been a doctor because she got high grades. She worked so hard beyond her difficulties to be able to do it. The most important thing is don't take away a child's dream. Maybe it will cause a lot of things to happen that would not be the best thing. Leave the dream, and the dream will adjust itself as you support it, as you go along. It doesn't matter what the dream is. What matters is they can connect their learning to their goal. So that's what I mean by permission to exceed expectations. As a parent, we shouldn't be trying to impose what we want on the child or on the youth, but we should think about making sure they have a good character that reflects good qualities, and then have them be inspired by different things in order to become, to think about what they'd like to become, how they'd like to contribute. And if they don't know what they want to contribute, then take them to do service, to do things for others, to look at different ways of contributing until they get inspired by something that they can connect to. When you give them clear limits of reasonable behavior and permission to exceed expectations, then they develop feelings of security and well-being. And when they feel secure, and what makes them feel secure is significant others encouraging them to meet their goals and to rise to their highest levels, inspiring them, believing in them, telling them that we know they can do it. So I kind of call this future-focused discipline. Try to see in the child what they could become and be very generous in what it is that you think they could become. Because then when you're disciplining anything, okay, I understand you want to do this. And so how will this contribute? Then they start thinking about their own behavior in relationship to their goals. And when they have feelings of security and well-being, it causes them to become creative and productive. And they start developing more and more skills. Discipline leads to discipline. If they become interested in something and they start working towards it, they're going to get excited about it. And maybe they'll change course for something else, but they would have developed some more discipline on the way to that. Next slide, Roy. So the big concept that we want to talk about is future-focused discipline. It's what I call future-focused discipline. And it's something that I've developed in working with many youth over many, many years. This is the developing of the student's capacity for wisdom is central to Nancy Campbell Academy's approach to education. And what that would mean is what is wise is to regard each human being as a noble human being that can make noble choices and pursue them valiantly. So when we work in conversations to help a youth identify things they're interested in, what they might like to do, trying many things until something sparks what they want to do, and then connecting their learning to that, then we start seeing the fruits of future-focused discipline. So now all of your activities are focusing that way. But if a young person, at the school does something wrong, and I bring them into my office to talk about it, we don't try to pretend what happened didn't happen. This is what happened, but this is not how I see you. I see you as this kind of person that's pursuing these kind of things. Now, I don't understand, and don't ask why, ask what. What were you thinking when you did this thing? What was what were you thinking about that would allow you to do that? Because it's not the way I see you. It's not what you are. It's not what you're going to become. So I never talk to them like the wrong thing that they did is part of them. I talk to them like that thing is a mistake. That thing doesn't belong as part of your trajectory to where you're going. And because we talk like that, and of course it has to be sincere, I really believe it, I'm not just saying it, and the youth feels that I really believe it, they honestly say, well, I don't know what I was thinking. Something, maybe I wasn't thinking at all, or I was tired or whatever, and I'm really sorry that this has happened. They immediately move away from that negative behavior and want to change it. Now, of course, I'm the principal and I have authority and they are sitting in my office. But the conversation is genuine. It's genuinely believing in them and seeing that they have this capacity to make a difference, to make a contribution. And I'm waiting for that, and I believe they're going to do it. Because if you think about your own educators, think back to the people that educated you. It's very interesting that if you think which teacher or which person had the greatest impact on you, when you stop to think about that, it's always someone that actually believed in you. Now, they might not have had a big conversation with you, but somehow they communicated to you that I know that you're going to make a contribution. I know that you are an exceptional person. You have some unique things to offer. And somewhere along the line, despite all the other things that might have happened, that's what is going to connect to you, and that's going to lead you to do big things. That's why we call it the big concept. Help connect them to their future contribution. It doesn't have to be spectacular. It just has to be something that will be meaningful, that they would regard as meaningful, and they're the ones that are identifying that. All I'm doing, or all you're doing as a parent, is helping them reach their goals that are going to be constructive goals that are leading to something positive, demonstrating their nobility, that despite all the difficulties, they've risen above those difficulties and they're going to contribute. We have to be able to talk to them in a way that inspires them to want to be what it is they can be, and not us tell them what it is they can be. Make sure they're just defining that, discussing what their contribution can be, and then helping them to see as well why that contribution would be so important. Okay, the next one, Roya. The historical figure Abdu'l-Baha provides an overview of what could be regarded as the levels of development for moral education. And I'm going to just go through this quotation because it talks to us about what each level of development has to be. Do you want to change to the next one? So this says, every imperfect soul is self-centered and thinketh only of his own good. But as his thoughts expand a little, he will begin to think of the welfare and comfort of his family. That's the first stage of development. When your child is little, you're meeting all their needs when they're a little infant. And then as they become 2, or they start to become aware of their impact, and not 2 might be a bit early, but they can become aware of their effect at that age. And that's when we really are starting to help them see how it feels to be the other person. And then what they can do to contribute to the welfare of the family. And that's a very important concept. Children, should not get the idea that you're just a machine. They have to get the idea that you're a person, you need comfort and love just like they do. And they also have to get the idea that they're capable of providing some of this. If his ideas still more widen, his concern will be for the welfare and felicity of his fellow citizens. So now it's gone to the community. Not only can I help my family, but I can make a contribution to the community. I can do things that make a difference to others around me. And that's a very important thing because, again, it's helping them come out of themselves and become something different than just self-centered, or even just thinking about their family alone. So, and then it says, he will be thinking of the glory, sorry, and if it still widens, if still they widen, he will be thinking of the glory of his land and of his race. So that's where he starts to realize he's part of a bigger picture, his country, his people. And he starts to want to be concerned for the well-being of his country. But when ideas and views reach the utmost degree of expansion and attain the stage of perfection, then will he be interested in the exaltation of humankind. He will then be the well-wisher of all men and the seeker of the weal and prosperity of all lands. This is indicative of perfection. So what's interesting about this slide is or this quotation, is that we human beings develop their perspective on change by thinking about all of mankind. Lots of things could be happening in our family or at a local level that to us may not seem right or may not seem just. And if we look at it in the world perspective, we get a different kind of perspective. And we start to see how we're all different, but those differences are valuable and they contribute to the whole, and everyone can contribute to the common good. And we must raise our children and our youth to contribute to the common good. Next slide. With human nobility at the center, the goal of education becomes the individual's growing ability to become aware of their nobility and apply inherent noble qualities to put into action wise approaches to enhance their individual lives and contribute to the community at large. So this quotation is talking about how, as I become aware that others around me know that I'm a noble human being, and I have this capacity to demonstrate noble qualities, good virtues, good things that are going to make a difference in the world, but I have to think about wise approaches. Now, once a man came up to me in one country and said, if a man was drinking all the time and you knew that he was an alcoholic, and he came up to you and he asked you for some money and you gave him some, would God reward you for your generosity? And that's an interesting question because we think, okay, to give would be good. And I said to him, well, I might get some reward for my generosity, but I wouldn't get any reward for my wisdom because I've helped him make more of a disaster of his life by giving him money. What would be better is I could take him to get food. I could make sure that he gets some nutrients in his body, which he doesn't have. I could maybe talk to him. In other words, there's lots of different wiser ways to help him than to just not care or excuse myself by letting him off. So wisdom means, yes, I could give him some money, but that's not the wisest thing to do to help him. And it's not the kindest thing to do. I have to consider what it is that would really be helpful to him because I'm always thinking about the common good, the long-term good that must be there. Next slide, Roya. Thank you. So that's the presentation for the beginning. And I think if you have, Nancy is going to field questions. I hope that
Yes.
you may have some.
Thank you. Okay, if anyone has any questions that were not text to me or WhatsApp to me, please feel free to put them in the chat box on the side. I think that's open now. It wasn't open during the talk because of a few technical problems I think Roya was experiencing. Thank you, Roya. You've tried to do a good job and have. So if you do have questions that you haven't emailed or texted me, please put them in the chat box. I'm going to field these. I'm going to ask the three that I have here. And then if you send any by email or put them in the chat, we'll make sure that you get your answers from Mr. Naylor. So the first question, Mr. Naylor, is there is so much talk of not asking for too much of your children, not being a burden or expecting or guilting them. On the Grammys, one celebrity got a huge applause when they said, expect nothing from your children and you won't be disappointed. I have a friend that when I told my daughter I was ill, She accused me of guilting and suggested I should find some adult to talk to. How do you feel about, how do we balance what is right or wrong for our children who are, and I guess it depends on ages. That's all this says.
Okay. So, you know, every family has what I would call principles that they operate on. Sometimes we don't take the time to articulate those consciously. And so, you know, we may end up with different members of the family having different ideas and never really clarifying. So I always think that it's very valuable, especially as our child ages and grows and develops, that we would our unifying principles. And it doesn't matter how diverse our religions are, or our thoughts. As a family, we have to agree on our unifying principles. And we can't assume that everyone would know what they are. And so let's say, for example, in answer to this question, the family agrees that we are a hospitable family to whoever comes into our house. Then we talk a little bit about, okay, so we're all agreeing that we want to be kind hosts, we want to be hospitable. So what does that mean for each of us? Then we have a principle by which we call our behavior. And our behavior would be to be kind and thoughtful to those that come to visit. Or let's say we have a principle that when anyone is ill, we treat them with the utmost kindness. And we don't act with suspicion towards them. And so that could be a principle. And then when that principle is not being followed or agreed upon, we remind each other in ways that are hopefully not just hitting them in the head, but in ways that make people, inspire people to want to do the right thing. And even if the others are not doing it, we must always provide the example of that. We must try ourselves to demonstrate what it is we're talking about. And if we treat others that are ill with kindness and love and go and look in on them and see if they need anything, then of course that can happen. And if our child or our youth are not doing that, then we have a discussion, a conversation. And the conversation has to be about, you know, I know sometimes we're tired and so on, and things don't always happen in the way that they should. And sometimes when we're really tired, somebody else might be really sick, and that has to trump being really tired, and we have to push through the effort, the extra effort. So could you help do this? So sometimes giving a task helps. But the goal would be to have conversation to raise the level of consciousness. One of the principles that's really important that we keep saying is we must continue to have conversation, raise the level, conversation raises the level of consciousness. And when the consciousness level is raised, then development starts to take place. So we don't let things just pass with no expectations. You know, we try to talk to each other, encourage each other, create a learning environment. Like how can our family learn how to be the most kind to people that are ill? Wouldn't you like to be in that situation? So we try to do this. We try to find new ways to talk about it, not in just a preachy kind of way, but in a discovery kind of way. And I think that helps. In some cases, you may want to consequence things if they're out of control. In other words, you know, we all contribute to the social good. Maybe you're not doing that right now, and it would be a horrible thing if we all started not doing it. So we have to have frank discussions. And I don't know about this guilt thing. The guilt thing is not, we label things so we can prevent people from talking. But the goal here is not to create guilt. We can even say, I don't want to create guilt. I want to create inspiration so that we can get behind this principle that we all believe in. So take some time as a family to develop your unifying principles. It might be that others don't share them. It might be that you can't agree on them. In some cases, you might have some people in the family that agree on these principles and others that don't. And then you can decide whether or not that is a unifying principle in your family.
Okay. The next one is, I'm looking for practical advice, meat and potatoes type of answer. My child is 15 years old and speaks often disrespectfully to me, even though I've never spoke to them in that way. I understand he's a teenager, but still feel it's not good. He only wants to be online. Even dinner has become a problem. Calling him for dinner is a problem. Me speaking with him seems to be a problem.
Again, well, there's different things that you can do about that. My wife's first line of thought to my kids were, could you say that again in a better way? So that was the first thing that she would say if there was a disrespectful tone or an agitated tone, which was kind of nice because it was sort of like we could all get a little bit rattled here and there and not say things the way we want. But she made it clear to them that, could you say that again in a better way? Depending on their age, we can consider a reasonable consequence, which could be, pardon?
They said 15-year-old?
Yeah, okay, so a 15-year-old is making choices, big choices, but you are in charge of the internet and you are the ones that have the capacity to help them see why it would not be good for this to be carried to excess. And, you know, I always talk about, with the youth at the school, for example, we sometimes look at internet addiction. We watch some videos about that. We have discussions about it, like how much is too much? When do you know that it's going too far? When it interferes with your relationships, often it's considered addictive because your relationships are going down the tubes because you have just one focus. So let's have a conversation about how intense you're getting about this. And maybe it needs to be put in some boundaries, like how much would be too much? When would be a good time? Do we agree that dinner is off limits? So that means, okay, the internet has to go off. You can lose your phone. You can lose your internet privileges. Maybe we should, what would help you? You know, lots of times with kids that are that age, you have to say, I don't know what's going to help you, but we know that we've agreed on this. So tell me what kind of thing would help. Maybe it's helpful if we just shut it all off and you don't have to think about it. Or would you like me to give you 2 warnings and then something more drastic happens? So you create the structure. Remember the very first circle showed clear limits and permission to exceed expectations. So clear limits would be how much time is too much time. When is it appropriate? When is it not appropriate? Because they are going to have to develop the skills to manage this. And if they can't develop the skills to manage it, it's going to compromise their ability to contribute, their ability to make a difference. You know, we don't exist for the internet. The internet exists to serve a purpose. And we have to put it back in its place. We have to have wise discussions about it and engage them. Now, they may not want to talk. They may say, we're not going to talk. Then I would just shut off the internet until we're able to talk. And I'd say, you know, we have to sort this out and figure it out. And we're going to have a conversation. Maybe you're not ready now. That's okay. But there won't be any internet until we can have that conversation. And we're going to have to come to some wisdom about it. And they can get mad and they can stomp and they can do what they want to do. But in the end, I don't live in a Cold War. We're going to have a discussion, a decent discussion. We're going to come to good conclusions. I didn't want to do that, but there's no alternative here right now. So don't, remember, if somebody has a gift for you and you don't accept it, to whom does it belong? It belongs to the person that's giving it. So if my teenager wants to get really angry, I don't accept that gift. It's not, I didn't do anything. I'm not going to be upset. So you're going to have to take your own gift back to yourself, figure out what you're angry about, and then we're going to have a conversation and make a wise, sensible decision of what's going to happen. And the more that expectation becomes clear that we consult and we make wise decisions, that's how we operate. That is one of our principles. Sorry, that's the only way we can do it, because we are diverse. You're very different than me I'm very different from you. So we have to consult to figure out what works for everybody and what is focused on our purpose, not just whatever we feel like whenever we feel like it.
Thank you. So we have 3 questions that are kind of similar, or at least have a vein that's running through. So we only have 3 minutes left. So I'm going to try to state this question and combine a little bit of what a few people have said, reminding everybody that all your questions will be answered in our Q&A by email and also on our website. So one of the questions, it says, when do we stop our children for choosing them for themselves when they are making what we feel are wrong choices? How do we set the limits and goals in order to balance things? We have one person here who is saying that they notice that sometimes parents from the East tend to set very high expectations. The other comment that I have is saying that their children want to choose something different than they would like them to choose, but they are grown children, almost 16 or 17 years old. Do they allow that? These kind of all is the same vein.
Okay, so I would say that, you know, it's the foundation that I kind of work from is that a 15-year-old is not equipped to do everything in life, but they certainly can make your life really difficult in their wish to pursue what it is they wish to pursue. Now, again, we can have the power of conversation to talk and to try to really come to an understanding together. But in the end, they do have the right to choose, and they will choose. Now, if you don't like what they're choosing, and okay, so let's say, for example, your youth does choose something or do something that you don't like, and you know that it's wrong. To me, a parent should always tell their youth that that, in my opinion, is not the correct thing to do. You never leave that ambiguous if you're clear about what is wrong. That is not the right thing to do, and these are the reasons why it's not the right thing to do. Now, a child may persist in trying to do it, in doing it, and you can say, I'm going to always tell you what is the right thing to do, whether you like to hear it or not. And one reason why I keep repeating myself to the level that I might be perceived as nagging you is because I'm worried that if I don't keep telling you, you might think I changed my mind. So don't ever think that I've changed my mind unless I tell you I've changed my mind. I'm just patiently waiting for you to do the right thing. And I'm going to keep telling you the right thing occasionally just because I have to. But I'm going to try not to nag you. I'm going to try to have you think about the best thing for you in the long run and make that decision. But at some point, we will, as a parent, have to acknowledge that they may do it differently than we want them to. And they may learn that what we had said was correct. But sometimes unless you want to, in the past, people would go into extreme force to get what it is they want and use a lot of force on children and youth. And that's not the way to do it in the long run. When I worked with a lot of parents that abused their children, and I'm not talking about mild, this or that, I'm talking about severe. Even in those cases, I found in most cases, people didn't know how to make the child do what they wanted. And so they just kept doing one thing harder and harder and harder until it led to a disaster in their family or a disaster in the child's life or theirs. So we have to recognize that we might have to let go and let something go a little further than we would like. And then, but continue to give the wise guidance. Never, never change the principle that as a parent, you have to provide that wise guidance. And you have to say what you think is wise. Now, maybe they will do something different, and maybe that will work out really well for them and for you. Or maybe through your wise counsel, they'll change their mind and do what it is that you think is best. But use consultation together. Really try to understand what's motivating them. Try to get to the depth of understanding of it. Because through that consultation, you'll develop a much better relationship, a much better clarity of understanding of why you want what you want, why they want what they want, and try to figure out how to move it forward from there.